Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time when life smelled faintly of smoke, sweat, and something mildly fermented. You're going to spend a full day in the medieval world, not as a noble, not even as a merchant, but as an ordinary villager. Picture this: your home is a one-room hut, the floor is packed dirt, and there's something definitely alive in the thatched roof above you. You probably won't survive this day, but don't worry, we're here just to imagine it, not actually get the plague. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyelids flutter open to the sound of a rooster who seems to have no sense of time. It's not even fully light out. Your body aches from a night on a straw mattress that, frankly, could also be a hedgehog habitat. It's cold, not forgot to turn on the heat cold. It's your breath fogs inside your home cold. There's a draft creeping up from the corner of the room where a gap in the wall lets in the morning air, and possibly mice. You pull yourself upright and immediately regret it. Your joints crack like someone dropped a sack of walnuts. You slept in most of your clothes, because changing before bed is a luxury for people with multiple outfits and personal hygiene standards. Breakfast awaits. Sort of. You shuffle over to the table, which is really just a wooden plank on two uneven legs. Someone, maybe you, left out yesterday's bread, and now it's stiff enough to double as a tool for medieval dentistry. You gnaw at it thoughtfully while sipping something that is technically ale, not because you like it, but because clean water is still considered a bold and risky choice. The ale is sour, warm, and contains mysterious floating bits. You try not to ask questions. In the background, a fire crackles, your only source of heat. It smells like damp logs and singed wool. The smoke escapes through a hole in the roof, unless the wind decides otherwise. Historians still argue whether medieval homes had chimneys this early or just creative smoke damage patterns. You stretch and scratch your shoulder. There's an itch you've been meaning to deal with. You reach under your tunic and find, oh, a tiny, unwelcome passenger. Lice, again. Congratulations, you're sharing your body heat with nature's tiniest acrobats. And they don't pay rent. As you glance around, the one-room house begins to stir. If you live with a family, they're all waking up now too. Maybe it's your partner, a few kids, a grandmother, and a goat. Everyone rises with the sun because that's what the sun is for. Alarm clocks didn't exist, and nobody's getting a lie-in when the cow needs milking. You fumble with your boots. They're rough, heavy, and smell like they've been to war. You stuff your feet in and sigh. There's hay in one, and what you hope is just mud in the other. Your toes are immediately cold. Again. Outside, the light has finally shifted from pitch black to something resembling early morning fog soup. You lift the wooden latch on your door. It creaks like an old man with opinions, and step outside into the mud. Not a bit muddy, but thick, ankle deep. Everywhere you go, mud. It squelches. You're not awake until at least one shoe is halfway sucked off your foot. The air smells of smoke, compost, and possibly pig. The pigs live close to the people, sometimes closer than your own siblings. They snort contentedly from their pen, which might just be a few sticks tied together. You nod respectfully. Pigs know things. Breakfast is technically over, but you're already hungry. Your belly growls, a common medieval soundtrack. Meals are small, spaced out, and nutritionally confusing. Most days begin and end with the same flavor, beige. You spot your neighbor across the way. They're already outside, shooing chickens with a broom and muttering something about demons in the well again. You nod politely. Everyone's got their morning routine. In the background, the village slowly comes alive. Fires are being stoked, goats are bleating, and someone is already hammering something. You hear a distant child wailing, followed by a gentle shush, and possibly a Latin prayer. Or a threat. It's hard to tell. As the sun lifts, its rays begin to creep over the thatched rooftops. The light reveals the true color of the village. Brown. Brown mud, brown walls, brown clothes, brown soup. Color is rare and expensive. Dyed fabric is for nobility. And even they tend to stick to muted tones, lest they get too happy. You step back inside briefly to grab your tools for the day, an old hoe with a wobble, a wooden bucket that leaks just slightly, and a belt pouch filled with hope. Your chores are waiting, and there are no weekends. Still, despite the roughness, the air feels alive. There's birdsong from somewhere, a breeze carrying the scent of pine, and the distant clatter of a cartwheel that's definitely going to fall off by noon. You rub your eyes and trudge into the day ahead, already wondering how long until the next stale bread break. Historians still debate whether the average villager's life was truly miserable or just relentlessly practical. There was community, tradition, and a deeply rooted sense of purpose, but also dysentery, lots of dysentery. And as your stomach grumbles and your feet sink deeper into the village path, one thing is clear: modern plumbing might actually be humanity's great. Your hands fumble in the dim light as you attempt to wrestle yourself into what counts as your outfit for the day. The concept of getting dressed in the medieval world is less about fashion and more about survival. Every layer has a purpose: warmth, modesty, and sometimes, though rarely, status. But today you're just trying not to freeze or offend anyone. First, the shirt. It's made of coarse linen, scratchy against your skin and already smelling faintly of onions. Not because you ate onions, because someone stored them nearby. Laundry day, for the record, happens once every few weeks, and it's not so much laundered as aggressively dunked in cold water and whacked against a rock. Over your shirt goes the tunic. It's wool, of course. Everything warm is wool. Wool keeps you from freezing, but it also keeps in all the itches. As you pull it over your head, the static makes your hair do something truly medieval. The tunic's color is best described as murky oatmeal, though it might have once aspired to be green. Dyes exist, but they're a luxury. You're not a noble, so you get browns and grays, and maybe a suspicious mustard hue if someone spilled something. Now for the hose. Yes, hose, not pants. You pull the long woolen stockings up each leg, securing them to a linen undergarment with ties. Medieval fashion is all about ties. Not zippers, not buttons, just dozens of fabric strings that need threading, tying, and constant adjusting. You will, without fail, spend part of your day retying things that mysteriously unfasten themselves. Shoes are next. They are not comfortable. Leather, stiff, and shaped like a loaf of bread that got stepped on. These shoes are hand-stitched and feature absolutely no arch support. Inside, there's something crunching. Hopefully straw, possibly beetle. You decide to ignore it. As you bend over to fasten your shoelaces, again cords, you feel something shift beneath your tunic. A tiny tickle, then another. You pause. Lice again. These uninvited guests love the warmth of your body and the convenience of your rarely washed wool. You scratch, sigh, and consider burning everything. But you won't, because you only have this one set. And then there's your headwear. If you're a man, maybe you wrap your head in a coif, like a tight-fitting cap to keep your ears warm and your hair from scaring the goats. If you're a woman, you probably wrap your hair in a wimple or veil, especially once married. Hair is not for public display. unless you're scandalous or a child.
You take a moment to look at yourself in a polished bit of metal. No mirrors here, just reflections of anything remotely shiny. You look fine. Exhausted, puffy-eyed, mildly haunted, but that's the medieval aesthetic. And speaking of aesthetic, there's dirt on everything. Clothes are washed rarely and worn constantly. You have patches on your tunic, a mystery stain on your sleeve, and your hose have sagged already, giving you that classic medieval I gave up halfway through dressing look. Outside, someone shouts your name, or a version of it shouted in a dialect that hasn't been heard in centuries. You grunt a reply and reach for your cloak. It's heavy, weathered, and smells like sheep, because it's made of sheep. You drape it over your shoulders and fasten it with the pin you treasure most, the one that doesn't stab you every third step. You step outside again, better dressed now, but still regretting every square inch of fabric. The wind finds new gaps in your layers and pokes through with glee. You wish you had gloves, but you lost them during last year's frost fair. Or maybe the goat ate them. You're not sure. In the village square, you spot others wearing similar get-ups. No one looks clean, no one looks fashionable, and yet somehow everyone is judging each other's tunics. Someone nearby has a strip of dyed trim on their cloak. Fancy. You make a mental note to accuse them of sorcery later, just in case. A child runs past barefoot despite the cold. Children often wear less, or sometimes nothing at all, until they're old enough to need dignity. This one is caked in mud and shouting joyfully, chased by a goose that radiates pure evil. As you walk toward your work for the day, you keep adjusting your belt. It's slipped again, and now your tunic is riding up in the back, exposing your hose ties and your questionable dignity. You adjust it quickly before anyone notices, not that they'd comment, just gossip about it for the next 3 festivals. You pass the smithy, where sparks dance like fireflies around a man in a soot-black tunic. His apron is stiff as armor. He nods at you, and you nod back, both acknowledging the other's morning misery. One final glance down confirms your outfit is as ready as it'll ever be. And it better be. You'll likely wear this again tomorrow, and the day after that, and possibly to your own wedding, funeral, and court trial. That's the thing about medieval fashion. It doesn't change quickly. It doesn't change easily, and it rarely changes at all. Clothing isn't about personal expression. It's about surviving the weather, the judgment of the parish priest, and most of all, the lice. Still, as you tie the last stubborn knot on your cloak and shuffle toward your labor, you can't help but feel a tiny flicker of satisfaction. You're dressed, you're semi-warm, and you've only been bitten once this morning.
You squelch out of your doorway and into the village proper, where the ground is, how shall we say it, soup-like. It's a thick, unforgiving muck that never quite dries, no matter the season. Each step threatens to remove your shoe or your dignity, and frequently both. The main road through your village is technically called a street, but that implies planning. This is more of a general direction between huts shaped by centuries of feet and hooves and wheels groaning through generations. The scent hits you first. A rich blend of smoke, livestock, compost, and something uniquely pig-adjacent. You wrinkle your nose, but no one else even flinches. This is just what outside smells like. Your neighbor, old Merrick, trudges past you in the opposite direction, leading a cow that looks almost as annoyed as he does. He gives you a nod that somehow says, "Nice weather. I don't trust that priest. And my cow has worms." All at once. To your right, the baker's hut puffs out a single column of smoke, promising warm bread, but that bread's already spoken for. Most villagers line up before sunrise to get a piece, often bartering with eggs, mending services, or occasionally heartfelt compliments if they're especially broke. You remember the time someone tried to pay an interpretive dance. It didn't go well. Children dart past you barefoot again. Their feet are permanently mud-stained, and their laughter is underscored by a very real fear. That goose. Yes, That one. You see it waddling with menace, its beady eyes locked on a new victim. You sidestep swiftly and let it pass. Everyone in the village has been bitten at least once. Legends say it once fought a knight. The knight lost. You make your way to the market square, which is more of a market circle if we're being geometric. The stalls are simple, some canvas, some rough wood, and most of them are run by people you know a little too well. There's Edith, who sells turnips and always glares like you personally insulted her soup. There's Wilfred, who somehow always smells of fish even though you live 40 miles from the sea. And then there's Marjorie, who sells herbs and swears she's never been caught in any witch-related incidents. No, sir.
You pass the alewife's corner. She's already serving drinks to two men arguing about who saw the comet first. They're both wrong, of course. It was the goose. Probably. There's little money changing hands. Coins are rare and precious. Most exchanges are trade-based. Wool for grain, eggs for cloth, a carved spoon for someone's loyalty in the next land dispute. You eye a small pot of butter and consider whether that wooden comb you whittled might be good enough. Probably not. A woman is loudly berating her husband in the street. Something about the pig he loaned out and the fence that now has a suspicious hole. Everyone's listening but pretending not to. Gossip is the village's favorite breakfast. Nearby, a man is emptying a bucket into the midden heap, the village's official pile of everything awful. It steams faintly. You breathe through your mouth and move along. Historians still debate how much interaction villagers had with each other on a daily basis. Some say medieval life was deeply communal. Others argue there was plenty of quiet solitude. But when the village is this small, solitude is a luxury reserved for going into the woods and pretending to look for firewood. At the far end of the street, the reeve passes by, a local official who acts somewhere between a mayor and a tattletale. He carries a stick to signify authority, though mostly he uses it to point at things he doesn't like. You nod at him. He frowns at your tunic hem, which has come untied again. You quickly fix it. Nobody wants a fine for looking too unseemly. You'd be surprised how many things are deemed unseemly in medieval life, including whistling, laughing too hard, or stepping over the church dog.
As you continue your walk, you notice how small everything is.
The huts are cramped, the alleys narrow, the doors low enough to regularly assault your forehead. Even the animals seem compact, though that could be because none of them are fed quite enough. You pass the smithy again. Sparks fly as a red-faced man hammers iron into shape. He's making horseshoes today, though yesterday it was nails. Tomorrow it might be an entirely new door for the tavern after that unfortunate incident involving the juggler and the suspicious eel. Every few steps, someone greets you or grunts at you, which is just as good. The social fabric of a medieval village is tight-knit, though not always pleasant. You know who's pregnant, who stole from the tithing barn, and who's pretending not to be in love with the brewer's apprentice. Privacy, much like soap, is hard to come by. As you round a corner back toward your home, you catch sight of a traveling friar passing through. His robes are patched, his sandals are muddy, and he carries a bag of relics that are probably chicken bones if we're being honest. Still, villagers gather round him, hoping for news, blessings, or just a distraction from their chores. You hang back, half listening. He's talking about distant cities and churches, and some miraculous fish that glowed. Historians still argue whether these friars were truly educated or just really good at improvising stories. The wind picks up slightly, rattling the signs over the ale stall and sending a loose feather tumbling past your feet. Somewhere, a sheep bleats. Somewhere else, a baby starts crying. The world spins on in its muddy, smoky, squawking rhythm. And as you head toward your next task, legs tired already and half a day still to go, you remind yourself that this is just normal. This is life. No alarms, no emails, no podcasts, just mud, market gossip, and an angry goose you still owe an apology. The mud sucks at your shoes as you trudge toward the field, tools slung over your shoulder like awkward medieval accessories. You're headed for work, the kind that starts early, ends late, and leaves you wondering if your spine might just back up and leave without saying goodbye. Farming in the medieval world is not picturesque. There are no golden sunlit wheat fields with birds tweeting idyllically. It's more sweat, blisters, and a surprising number of rocks that seem to multiply overnight. You squint at your patch of land. It looks small, but after 10 minutes with your wooden hoe, it might as well be France. You begin by turning the soil, or attempting to. The earth here is stubborn. It hasn't been plowed since last season, and even then it was mostly encouraged by suggestion. The tool in your hands isn't quite broken, but it's not quite functioning either. You swing, grunt, and dislodge approximately one very annoyed worm. Agriculture is the lifeblood of the medieval world, and most people are tied to the land, literally. If you're a serf, you work it, you pay taxes on it, and you pass it on to your children, along with the back pain. Historians still debate how free most peasants actually were. Some had rights, others were practically property. Either way, the work didn't care. Your breath comes in short puffs as you attack another patch of reluctant dirt. The sun is still climbing, and you're already sweating beneath your wool layers. You peel back your hood and let the air hit your damp neck. It helps for roughly 4 seconds. The birds watch you from a crooked fence post. You imagine they're judging your technique. One of them chirps in a tone that says, "Your rows aren't even straight." You hurl a clod of dirt in its general direction. It remains unimpressed. Next, it's time to sow seed. You grab a small pouch and start scattering, hoping some of it will actually take root and not be eaten by birds, bugs, or your cousin who forgets which field is his. You move steadily, rhythmically, like generations before you, trusting the cycle: plant, wait, pray, repeat. You pause to sip from your water gourd. It's warm, slightly earthy, possibly infused with yesterday's onion. Still, you're grateful it's not ale again. Even you have limits. As you lean on your hoe and stretch your back, your eyes drift across the horizon. You see other workers in their fields, figures bent like question marks, moving slowly under the rising sun. It's a quiet kind of companionship, each person battling their own corner of the earth. You give a nod to a fellow farmer across the way. He waves limply and immediately trips over a turnip. Lunch will come, eventually. You think about it.
You return to weeding. Your fingers dig into the soil, pulling up the stubborn intruders. You find a rock shaped like a rabbit, a suspicious bone, and, once, a rusty coin that bought you a half day off, and a very undercooked pie. Time moves oddly out here. There's no clock, no bell, just the sun above and the ache below. You sing a little tune under your breath, something passed down from your grandmother, probably meant to scare off crows or evil spirits, or both. The lyrics involve turnips and judgment. At one point, a man passes by, leading a donkey. The donkey gives you a look of mutual exhaustion. You consider trading places. Neither of you is winning today. Occasionally, you pause to stretch. This is a mistake, because once you stop, your body begins to consider rebellion. Your hands are sore, your knees creak, and your left shoulder is developing what medieval scholars might have called plowman's twitch. Probably not in Latin,
but you wouldn't know either way. Then the reeve rides by on a borrowed horse. He's inspecting everyone's progress, not for praise, but to make sure nobody is slacking. He gives you a look that says, "Don't even think about sitting down," and continues on. You resist the urge to trip him with your hoe, barely. As the sun climbs higher, you take a moment in the shade of a scraggly tree. It's not much, but it gives you just enough reprieve to remember what your spine used to feel like before you met this particular clump of earth. Lunch arrives, a miracle. A child you vaguely recognize drops off a cloth bundle. Inside, half a loaf of dense bread, a chunk of hard cheese, and what might have once been a pear. You tear into it with the enthusiasm of someone who has wrestled dirt for 5 hours. The cheese squeaks as you chew it. The bread could be used as armor. Still, it's fuel. You watch clouds for a few minutes, picking out familiar shapes. One looks like a sheep, another like the reeve falling in a pond. You allow yourself a smile, and then it's back to work. Because even if your tools are ancient, your legs wobbly, and your patience thinning, the field still needs tending. Every weed pulled, every seed planted, is a tiny rebellion against the starvation that looms at the edge of every bad season. Historians still argue whether the medieval peasant's life was one of quiet misery or resilient pride. Maybe both. Probably both. But in this moment, as you swing your hoe one more time and curse softly under your breath, you are part of something old, muddy, and completely un-air-conditioned. A beetle crawls over your boot. You salute it. You're both just trying to survive this field. Your stomach rumbles again as the sun begins its slow descent, casting golden light across the tired landscape. You wipe your hands on your tunic, not because they're clean, but because it's the only napkin you've got, and head back toward the village. Your body moves stiffly, like it's arguing with itself over the very concept of motion. Food. You can practically hear the word echoing in your bones. Back home, or what passes for home, you're greeted by the usual scent cocktail: soot, must, and someone's feet. It's not clear whose. You're not going to ask. Tonight's dinner is already in the works, which means there's a pot suspended over the hearth, bubbling slowly. You peek in. It's gruel. Again, a timeless blend of grains, water, and the vague suggestion of flavor. You stirred with a stick that once aspired to be a spoon. The consistency is best described as gloopy optimism. If you're lucky, someone's managed to score a bit of onion or a scrap of salted pork to toss in. Not too much, though. You don't want to waste the excitement all at once. Meals are communal, simple, and repetitive. They are also surprisingly loud. Everyone's talking, slurping, coughing, or arguing about whether that one neighbor is cursed. You find a place on the bench and grab a hunk of stale bread. It's your utensil, your napkin, and your side dish, all in one. You tear it apart and use it to scoop a bit of gruel into your mouth. It tastes like warmth, grain, and not quite enough salt. Still, it fills the gap. Sort of. Someone offers you a piece of hard cheese. It's sharp enough to bite back. The outer edge is a little suspect, but you eat around it. Cheese was never meant to be soft in this century. There's a small bowl of boiled cabbage making the rounds. You take a spoonful, chew thoughtfully, and wonder if cabbage has always tasted like boiled regret. It has. It absolutely has. Historians still argue whether the medieval diet was nutritionally sound or a slow ticket to scurvy. On the one hand, it was largely plant-based, which sounds trendy. On the other, it was deeply beige and deeply repetitive, which isn't so much a diet as a test of the human spirit. A child across the table makes the mistake of mentioning meat. You hear a sigh ripple through the room like a breeze. Meat is rare, expensive, and saved for feast days or bribes. When it does appear, it's often salted into oblivion or suspiciously chewy. Once, someone swore their chicken had teeth. No one has ever quite forgotten. You gnaw on a turnip and consider dental health, or rather
You've heard stories. A man in the next village had a rotten tooth pulled with pliers and sang hymns the entire time. Not for comfort, for distraction. The pliers slipped twice. As you chew your very chewy dinner, you notice your neighbor grinning. His teeth are not all there. The gaps are prominent, the remaining few leaning like ancient gravestones. You nod respectfully. Survival is a team sport. Someone's telling a story now, something about a cousin's cousin who once tasted a spice. A real spice, not mustard seed or parsley, but cinnamon, actual cinnamon. They describe it with a reverence usually reserved for saints and mythical beasts. You've never seen it, never smelled it, and you're not entirely sure it exists. A debate breaks out. Was it cinnamon or just a really enthusiastic clove? Voices rise. The bread is passed around like a peace offering. Eventually, someone changes the subject to local politics, specifically whose goat got into the ale again. You listen with one ear, distracted by the bubbling pot. Someone just added a pinch of dried herbs, wild thyme maybe, or just dried grass. Either way, it smells better now. You ladle out a bit more into your bowl, grateful for the extra warmth, and try not to think about the fact that it's the same meal you had yesterday, and the day before, and probably again tomorrow. Still, it's not all bad. There's a kind of comfort in the ritual. You eat, you laugh, you argue about entirely unprovable facts. A woman swears she saw a fish with legs. A man claims he met a man who spoke Latin backwards. You nod like you believe both. Nearby, the family dog, technically more of a communal mutt, sniffs around for scraps. You drop a crust on the floor. It vanishes instantly. He looks at you with something resembling gratitude or hunger. Hard to tell. You lean back, foolish, and sigh. Your belly is no longer growling, just gently grumbling. Your hands are still dirty. Your tunic smells like wood smoke and disappointment. But for a fleeting moment, you're content. The fire pops, casting flickering shadows across the low ceiling. A log shifts, sending up a brief gust of smoke. Everyone coughs politely and ignores it. No chimney here, just hope and a hole in the roof. Someone passes around a jug of ale, strong, sour, and a little cloudy. You sip carefully. It tastes like barley and regret, but it's safer than the water, so you take another drink. Your shoulders relax a bit, your eyelids droop. Dinner fades. You've heard stories. A man in the next village had a rotten tooth pulled with pliers and sang hymns the entire time. Not for comfort, for distraction. The pliers slipped twice. As you chew your very chewy dinner, you notice your neighbor grinning. His teeth are not all there. The gaps are prominent,
the remaining few leaning like ancient gravestones. You nod respectfully. Survival is a team sport. Someone's telling a story now, something about a cousin's cousin who once tasted a spice. A real spice, not mustard seed or parsley, but cinnamon, actual cinnamon. They describe it with a reverence usually reserved for saints and mythical beasts. You've never seen it, never smelled it, and you're not entirely sure it exists. A debate breaks out. Was it cinnamon or just a really enthusiastic clove? Voices rise. The bread is passed around like a peace offering. Eventually, someone changes the subject to local politics, specifically whose goat got into the ale again. You listen with one ear, distracted by the bubbling pot. Someone just added a pinch of dried herbs, wild thyme maybe, or just dried grass. Either way, it smells better now. You ladle out a bit more into your bowl, grateful for the extra warmth, and try not to think about the fact that it's the same meal you had yesterday, and the day before, and probably again tomorrow. Still, it's not all bad. There's a kind of comfort in the ritual. You eat, you laugh, you argue about entirely unprovable facts. A woman swears she saw a fish with legs. A man claims he met a man who spoke Latin backwards. You nod like you believe both. Nearby, the family dog, technically more of a communal mutt, sniffs around for scraps. You drop a crust on the floor. It vanishes instantly. He looks at you with something resembling gratitude or hunger. Hard to tell. You lean back, foolish, and sigh. Your belly is no longer growling, just gently grumbling. Your hands are still dirty. Your tunic smells like wood smoke and disappointment. But for a fleeting moment, you're content. The fire pops, casting flickering shadows across the low ceiling. A log shifts, sending up a brief gust of smoke. Everyone coughs politely and ignores it. No chimney here, just hope and a hole in the roof. Someone passes around a jug of ale, strong, sour, and a little cloudy. You sip carefully. It tastes like barley and regret, but it's safer than the water, so you take another drink. Your shoulders relax a bit, your eyelids droop. Dinner fades.
Brushing your teeth is more of a theoretical gesture. If you're lucky, someone hands you a frayed twig and you chew it into a makeshift brush. Charcoal might be rubbed on if you're feeling fancy, but mostly it's about scraping and hoping for the best. Mouthwash? That's ale. You run your fingers through your hair. Technically, that's your comb now. Lice are a constant companion, like tiny, unwanted roommates. Everyone has them, you pretend not to. It's the polite thing to do. Someone offers you a dab of rose water, just a few drops to scent your neck. It masks the worst of the odors, at least until noon. Deodorant doesn't exist, and neither does shame about sweat. People just are. As you stretch and yawn, you glance toward the village green. The baker's smoke is already rising, and you catch the scent of bread mingling with the morning air. It's heavenly, and you won't be eating any of it unless you trade something of value like eggs or labor or your undivided attention during church. Speaking of which, Sunday is fast approaching and everyone's already preparing their best. That means their least ragged, least muddy clothes, often still bearing the badge of honor known as pig stain. You start brushing off your tunic with a flat stone. It's mostly symbolic. Hygiene is not exactly held to modern standards, but it's not total chaos either.
Public bathhouses still exist in many towns, especially in the earlier medieval centuries. People actually used them until the plague years, when paranoia about disease spread faster than the actual germs. Historians still debate whether bathhouses helped or hurt during outbreaks. What's certain is at some point people decided washing was suspiciously French and stopped bothering. You do what you can, a cloth wipe here, a finger scrub there, you scrape under your nails with a stick. Your feet are a disaster, but they're functional, and in this world, that's the gold standard. Your sleeping space is now a flurry of motion. Children are tugging on boots, women are rekindling the fire, and someone is already complaining about the pig's behavior again. No one is shocked. That pig is the emotional barometer of the household. You help sweep the floor with a bundle of twigs tied with string. Dust rises like memories. There's no tile, no carpet, just packed earth, smoothed by feet and habit. It's home, after all, if you squint. And then there's the latrine situation. If you're in the country, the woods are your friend. If you're in a town, prepare for chamber pots and the time-honored tradition of chucking the contents into the street with a warning cry, usually garde-l'eau, which loosely translates to duck peasant. You hear the call once this morning, followed by a splatter and a distinctly wet-sounding groan.
The village is already humming by the time you step outside, though humming might be generous. It's more like groaning, clanking, an occasional yelling, all the lovely sounds of pre-industrial productivity. The morning light cuts through the fog like a half-hearted attempt at cheerfulness, and the air smells like firewood, wet dirt, and livestock optimism. Welcome to your workday. Today, you're assisting with fieldwork, because everyone does, more or less, unless they're clergy, nobility, or somehow important enough to carry a feather quill and not a pitchfork. You, naturally, are not one of those lucky few. So into the mud you go. You trudge to the edge of the fields, your boots squelching in soil that's equal parts earth and regret. A team of oxen lumbers ahead of you, yoked to a heavy wooden plow. It's your job to keep the blade in line. The oxen don't like this job. You don't like this job. Even the blade looks like it wants to be somewhere else. And yet, here you are. You wrap your hands around the plow's wooden handles, already worn smooth by years of use and human sweat. Within minutes, your back is aching in places you didn't know existed, and your forearms are shaking like a nervous squirrel. Every step is a reminder that gym workouts are a luxury. This is the real full-body burn. Mainstream history agrees that medieval agriculture was backbreaking. Crop rotation systems like the three-field method were a kind of miracle for their time, but they didn't make the work easy, just slightly less doomed. You sow one field, leave another fallow, and plant legumes in the third. Legumes, by the way, are your new best friend. Not because you like beans, but because they fix nitrogen in the soil and let wheat grow next season. So yes, you eat beans now. A lot. You pause to drink water from a leather pouch. It's lukewarm, with a hint of sheep from wherever the bladder came from. You try not to dwell on that. You wipe your brow with a sleeve already soaked in grime and glance at the sun. It's barely mid-morning. The work never really stops. There are weeds to pull, ditches to clear, and animals to feed. The cows need walking. The pigs need shouting at. The chickens need chasing. You suspect the chickens enjoy this part. There's a lull around noon. That's your window to eat something, anything before the sun rolls back up its sleeves and resumes supervising your labor. Lunch is whatever you brought with you or whatever someone can spare. A hunk of coarse bread, hard enough to chip a molar, dipped in something that was once a soup. Maybe a lump of cheese. Maybe a pickled something or other. You chew slowly, not for mindfulness, just survival. A fellow worker sits beside you and begins picking lice from his shirt like he's inspecting raisins. He finds two, squishes them between his fingernails and shrugs. You nod like this is normal, because it is. A fly lands on your bread. You wave it away. It comes back.
It knows you're tired. You eventually give up and eat around it. By early afternoon, your muscles are screaming, your hands are blistered, and your nose has sunburned in exactly one uneven stripe. You push through because there's no choice. Productivity isn't measured in emails here. It's in rows plowed and seeds planted. And then, your favorite thing happens. Someone mentions taxes. The Lord Steward shows up on horseback. His cloak is velvet, his boots clean. His expression says, "I haven't shoveled anything in years, and I plan to keep it that way." He asks for the tithe, 1/10 of everything, because apparently God has an accountant. Then there's the labor tax, and the grain tax, and something vaguely called a sheeping fee. You hand over what you have and try not to weep into your tunic. Historians still argue whether feudal taxes were systematically enforced or more loosely applied, depending on the mood of the collector. Either way, it's not great when someone takes your lunch because it smells too nice to be untaxed. You finish the day's fieldwork as the sun begins to dip. Your back hurts in Latin. Your hands are raw. Your legs are coated in a mixture of mud, manure, and probably emotional trauma. But at least you're headed home. You think briefly about those medieval laws requiring every able-bodied man to contribute labor to maintain roads and bridges, known as corvée labor. You also think about how none of those roads have ever looked remotely maintained. It's a mystery. Before you reach your hut, you're asked to help with one last task, gathering firewood. This is not optional. You nod, because no wasn't invented until the Enlightenment. You head into the woods with a few others, wary of wolves, bandits, and overly curious nobles on horseback. You collect branches and twigs, avoiding anything that looks suspiciously like it could house bees. Bees are not your friend. Not today. Back in the village, the firewood is stacked beside the central hearth. That hearth, by the way, is the closest thing your community has to a living room. People gather there in the evenings, sharing warmth, stories, and whatever questionable stew is on rotation this week. As you lean near the fire, the ache in your spine begins to soften, just a little. You catch snippets of conversation, rumors of a new pilgrimage route, a tale about a fox who stole a hen, someone swearing they saw a ghost near the churchyard. Normal stuff. You nibble the last corner of your bread, feel a crumb fall into your shirt, and leave it there.
You don't sleep long. You never do. Before the sky even hints at sunrise, you're roused again, not by a rooster like in the stories, but by the coughing fit of someone 2 huts over. The walls are thin. The air is colder than your mood. And your joints? They creak like the hinges on a haunted castle door. You stretch, groan softly, and roll off your hay-stuff mattress. The day begins again. Except this time, you're not heading to the fields. Today is market day. You dress in layers because the wind is sharp and judgmental. Your best tunic, meaning the one with the fewest holes, is already stained with things you don't remember spilling. You throw a shawl over your shoulders and grab a small sack of goods. A few eggs, some dried herbs, maybe a handful of turnips if you're feeling flashy. This is your currency today. Coins are rare, like polite nobles. The market lies just outside the manor walls, near the crossroads where muddy trails collide. As you approach, the smells hit first. Smoke, spices, old fish, and optimism gone slightly stale. Then come the sounds. Shouts, laughter, clattering hooves, and the occasional, "Hey, that's my goat." You join the slow-moving river of humanity and animals. Chickens squawk from baskets. Geese honk like they own the place. A donkey brays loud enough to be considered a personal attack.
Someone's baby is screaming and no one knows whose. Markets are where your world expands, barely. You see faces from neighboring villages. A traveling merchant, cloaked in layers and mystery, offers a bit of saffron for an eye-watering price. Someone else has ribbons dyed a blue so deep it feels illegal. You trade your eggs for some coarse salt and a hunk of dubious-looking sausage. Fair deal. Mainstream history paints these medieval markets as chaotic but essential, tiny economies all their own. Goods move, gossip flows, and if you're lucky, no one gets trampled by a runaway cart. You spot the local alewife selling what she insists is last year's strongest brew. She winks at you with a toothless grin. You nod politely and keep walking. You've learned your lesson about that particular brew. It made someone hallucinate the Virgin Mary in a wheelbarrow. Then there's the entertainment. A jongleur juggles apples and shouts limericks while walking a plank balanced on a barrel. A man with a trained bear performs tricks for copper coins. You're not sure who looks more tired, the bear or the man. A puppet show begins nearby, reenacting some half-remembered version of the Crusades, where everyone speaks with a French accent and the moral is unclear. Fringe accounts suggest markets weren't just for trade. They were also how news and tall tales traveled. Someone might claim to have seen a dragon just past the mill. Another swears a relic bone from St. Cuthbert can heal boils. You nod like you believe it. Everyone does. It's part of the charm.
You duck into a stall, shaded by patched canvas. Inside, a traveling apothecary hawks miracle remedies. Dried toad powder, ground antler, something labeled moon seed that looks suspiciously like pebbles. He offers you a vial of cloudy liquid that promises to strengthen your humors and attract love. You're tempted, but the smell alone says it's more likely to attract raccoons. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine was more science or superstition. Frankly, it's both. Someone might recommend leeches, someone else suggests a boiled owl. Someone else shrugs and says, try prayer. Your best bet is not getting sick in the first place. You continue wandering. A monk is copying texts in a booth nearby. Slow, careful strokes of ink on vellum. You peer over his shoulder. He's illuminating a capital D with gold leaf and a tiny angel playing a harp inside it. It's absurdly beautiful. You realize that this is the medieval version of downloading something in 4K. It takes weeks. You trade a few herbs for a square of linen. It's rough, but it's new, and that counts for something. Then you hear shouting near the center square. You turn just in time to see a public punishment underway.
You fall asleep mid-thought.
It doesn't feel like falling. It feels like sinking. Like easing into a lukewarm bath, drawn by someone who meant well but didn't check the temperature. You dream of barley, just endless fields of barley, and a goose that speaks in riddles. You wake before dawn again, not to a clock, not even to the sun. Just your own bones deciding the nap is over. You sit up slowly, scratch your scalp and listen. Outside, nothing but the steady hush of wind and the occasional creak of a shutter. It's still dark, still early. But your body doesn't care. It never does. Today's not a feast day. It's not even a saint's day. It's a regular, ordinary, beige kind of day. You don't expect surprises, and that's comforting in its own lumpy way. You head out with a wooden bucket for water. The path is muddy, always muddy. Your shoes gave up the ghost 2 winters ago, and now your toes know the road like an old song. As you approach the village well, you pass by the baker's house. He's already up. You can smell the bread before you see the smoke. He gives you a nod. That's all. Words are expensive at this hour. The well groans as you lower the rope. It always sounds like it's complaining about being awake too. You fill the bucket. The water's cold and smells faintly of moss. You're not picky. Back home you set the pot to boil, add a few tired carrots and yesterday's cabbage core. It won't be stew exactly, more like hot wet encouragement.
Your thoughts drift to your neighbors. The miller's wife who says she once saw a ghost in the granary. The priest who talks too much about hell and not enough about soup. The blacksmith whose hands look like burnt leather and whose laugh makes babies cry. You think of them not because anything interesting happened, but because they're always there, like your shadow or the smell of damp wool. Outside, the village begins its slow, clumsy ballet. Roosters stretch their necks, doors creak open, fires sputter awake. The world turns on without anyone pushing it. And you prepare for another day. You eat your warm vegetables with 2 fingers and a flat hunk of bread that cracks like pottery. Then you wipe your mouth on your sleeve because that's what sleeves are for. By noon, you're in the fields again. The same field, the same tools, the same ache in your back that feels older than your name. You dig, plant, water, hope. The ground accepts your labor with all the warmth of a bureaucrat stamping paper. It doesn't care. It never has. You think about time, about how strange it is to measure life in seasons instead of years. Winter, Lent, harvest, mud, repeat. You think about what people centuries from now might say about you. Not you personally, no one will remember your name. But about people like you. Will they call you?
The peasantry, or the working class, or just those poor barefoot mud folks. Will they understand how much effort it took just to survive a Tuesday? Will they know the quiet pride in a patched tunic, the relief of finding an extra onion under a bench, the sacred ritual of scratching your back against a fence post, because you're alone, and the itch won't quit? Probably not. The day crawls forward. Clouds gather like rumors. Somewhere in the distance, thunder mumbles. You keep working until your hands say enough, louder than your brain can argue. You pack up your tools. You walk home slowly, like you owe the earth an apology. That night, as rain taps gently against the roof, you sit by the fire. Not close, just close enough to feel like you might get warm in the next 20 minutes. You sip a cup of something hot. It tastes faintly of tree bark and resignation. The candlelight flickers on your face. Shadows dance across the wall in the shape of your thoughts. You don't speak. There's no one to hear. But your silence says everything. I made it through the day. I made it back. I am, astonishingly, still here. You lie down again. The straw pokes in all the usual places. The blanket is thin, but it smells like your life. Smoke, onions, rain, and you. Your eyes close before you even say goodnight to no one. Tomorrow will come. The rooster will shout. The well will groan. The stew will boil. And you'll rise, you'll walk, you'll plant. And for reasons no one quite explains, that will be enough.
The rooster's crow splits the morning like an axe. You blink into the pale light and think just once that it might be nice to sleep until the sun is fully up. But sleep isn't in charge here. Routine is. Reluctantly, you stretch your limbs, one crack at a time, and listen to the stiff chorus of your joints. Congratulations. You've lived long enough for your bones to creak before the floorboards do. Breakfast is, well, it's a concept more than a meal. Some leftover broth, a bit of crust. Maybe a pear if the tree didn't lose the rest to birds overnight. You chew slowly, not for pleasure, but for time, stretching out the moment before the day starts pulling at your sleeves. You slip into your coarse tunic, the same one you wore yesterday and the day before that. Fashion isn't really a thing. Clothes are about 2 things: coverage and hoping they survive one more wash in the river. You strap on your belt, leather, cracked, passed down from someone you don't remember, and tuck in your knife. Not for combat, for cheese, should you ever see some. Today, you're walking to the nearest town. It's market day, and even though you don't have much to trade, you can at least look. Maybe pick up news. Maybe swap that threadbare chicken feather you found for a turnip someone forgot they hated. The road is mostly dirt and nostalgia. Trees arch overhead, whispering secrets in leaves you can't translate. You pass other travelers, some on foot, some with carts. One guy balancing a jug on his head, like he's auditioning for a medieval circus. Everyone nods. No one smiles. It's not unfriendly, just efficient. As the town comes into view, you notice the change. The air smells like smoke and sweat and onions frying in tallow. You breathe deeply anyway. It's exotic compared to cow dung and damp moss. The market buzzes with life. Stalls creak under the weight of goods, hand-woven baskets, bruised apples, mystery meats, and waxy candles shaped like saints who've seen better centuries. You wander through, not quite looking to buy, but definitely ready to stare. At one table, a man is selling relics, bones of saints, he claims. You're pretty sure one is a chicken femur. But who are you to argue with a man who calls himself Brother Justus and wears half a robe? Further down, you spot a woman selling leeches for balancing the humors. She's got the energy of a traveling sales rep and the eyes of someone who hasn't blinked in 4 hours. You back away politely. You finally reach the food stalls. You could buy a meat pie if you had a coin. You don't. But the seller's distracted and the smell is free, so you lean in and inhale like you're collecting the aroma for later.
While browsing textiles, meaning fingering cloth you'll never own, you hear a rumor. Someone's goat had twins, and they were both born with one black eye. Omen? Bad milk? Historians still argue whether rural superstitions were true beliefs or just a way to explain weird animal behavior without inventing veterinary medicine. You also hear that the Lord's wife has taken ill. Someone says it's a curse. Another says she's pregnant. And one bold lad suggests she's just tired of her husband. You snort softly. Dangerous joke. Excellent timing. By late afternoon, your feet hurt in 6 places. Your one trade, some eggs, has gotten you a lump of wax and half a stale onion. Not bad, honestly. You visit the church before leaving, just to sit. Not pray, sit. It's cool inside and the silence is weighty in a good way. Candles flicker before a wooden Madonna who stares at you like she knows how often you skip confession. As you make your way back, you realize something strange. You're tired, but not unhappy. You saw color today, blue ribbons, green glass beads, someone with red hair and a sense of humor. You saw a pig that looked like your uncle and a child trying to sell stones as healing relics, good hustle. Your life may be muddy and cold and overwhelmingly repetitive, but there are these moments. Small interruptions, a glint of silver in the gray. You reach home by dusk. Your legs buzz from the walk, and your face is sunburnt in the shape of your own discontent. You drink water like it owes you money, and collapse onto your straw bed with your arms flung out, dramatic as a saint in a painting. There's no dinner, just the onion. You nibble it like a squirrel, then burp and call that a meal. As you drift off, you remember a sound from the market, a traveling bard playing something sad on a stringed instrument made of gut and hope. You didn't know the song, but it made your chest ache in that good, hollow way. Your eyes flutter shut. Outside, a barn owl hoots like it's practicing threats. The wind picks up and taps gently against the shutter, like it's trying to be let in. You don't dream. Or maybe you do, but it's nothing you'd remember. Just the hush of trees, the rattle of carts, a marketplace that never quite closes. The next morning, you wake up with the sun already climbing, your back sore from yesterday's trek, and your neck at war with the shape of your straw-stuffed pillow. You stretch, wince, and notice your hands still smell faintly of onion. No time to linger, there's work to be done, and today's flavor is sewage. Not just any sewage, community sewage.
The village trench, affectionately called the channel, needs clearing. It's not a glamorous job, but if it overflows again, it'll flow straight through your neighbor's cabbage patch, and you really don't want to hear that story told for the next month. So, armed with a stick, a rake, and a cloth tied over your nose, you head out. Welcome to the sanitation standards of the Middle Ages, a rickety balance between superstition, necessity, and holding your breath. There's no plumbing, of course. Waste gets dumped in designated ditches, occasionally shoveled away by brave souls or desperate peasants. You, today, are both. The smell hits before you arrive, and not in a subtle way. It's like something died and then sent you a letter to complain about it. You gag, mumble a curse you made up just for this moment, and start poking at the sludge. You don't look too closely at anything. If it moves, you pretend it didn't. Funny thing, people in your time don't actually have a great grasp on what causes disease. Sure, they talk about bad air or imbalanced humors, and you've probably heard someone insist that wearing a red scarf protects against coughs. Historians still argue whether medieval people genuinely believed these things or just needed something, anything, to feel in control. As you work, you notice someone approaching, the village wise woman, hobbling over with her basket of dried herbs and absolutely zero respect for personal space. She's clutching a bundle of yarrow and murmuring to herself. She tells you she's brewing a poultice for your sore knee, which is weird because you hadn't mentioned your knee. She has the unsettling accuracy of someone who either reads auras or just watches you limp from her window. You take the poultice anyway. It smells like crushed grass and old sweat, but who are you to turn down free healthcare? Once the trench is cleared, you go down to the river to clean your tools and yourself. The water's cold enough to make your teeth rattle. You scrub your hands with sand and riverweed and call it good enough. No soap, of course. That's for the rich. You briefly consider diving in for a swim, but remember what probably trickled down here from the upstream village. Nope, just a rinse. Back home, you hang your damp tunic near the hearth. Someone has left a bowl of pottage on the bench. You sniff it, lentils, turnip, maybe the ghost of a carrot. You eat slowly, grateful and resigned at the same time. The flavor is mostly salt and regret, but it's warm, and that counts for something. In the afternoon, the steward arrives on horseback. You recognize him instantly by the way everyone suddenly looks very interested in hoeing their fields. He rides up in his quilted tunic, embroidered with the Lord's crest, and announces that there's a new grain tax. A groan ripples through the villagers like wind through dry grass. You don't even grow grain, but somehow you still owe half a sack. You nod along with everyone else, biting the inside of your cheek to keep from laughing or crying. You're not sure which. Taxes in your world are creative. Sometimes it's grain, sometimes chickens, sometimes a portion of your wool or honey, or a vague promise to help raise a barn one of these days. There's no receipts, no appeals, just the steward's word, and your hope he doesn't feel grumpy that morning. Once he leaves, the village exhales in unison. Someone makes a joke about tripping the steward's horse next time, and everyone chuckles just a bit too seriously. By late afternoon, you join others at the common well. It's where water is drawn and gossip is poured. A group of women are discussing a traveling friar who claims to carry relics from Jerusalem. Someone else swears he's just selling splinters from his firewood. You chime in, and someone offers you a boiled radish as a snack. You've never been so grateful for something so bland. A child asks you if it's true that bathing too often makes your skin fall off. You smile and tell her no, but you don't bathe more than once a month either, just in case. As dusk falls, a group gathers for a communal meal, a rare treat, often organized before harvest season or after a successful rabbit hunt. Tonight, it's because someone's cow gave birth, and the excitement feels like an excuse. You all sit in a circle around a fire, passing bowls and stories. Someone sings a ballad, off-key but with heart. A boy juggles 3 rocks until he drops one on his foot and pretends he meant to do that. Laughter bubbles up like a hot spring in winter. You lean back, full, not just from food, but from something deeper, community. The weird, inconsistent comfort of knowing you're not the only one struggling through mud and taxes and aching knees. The fire pops, sending sparks into the indigo sky. Stars are starting to gather above like quiet witnesses. No lanterns, no hum of electricity, just the sound of night insects tuning their legs like fiddles. You think about the trench, the steward, the stew, and you think, this isn't luxury, but it is life. Rough-edged, smelly, sometimes deeply unfair, but real. And as you drift into sleep that night, the smell of wood smoke in your hair and the weight of another borrowed day on your chest, you realize you might just make it another morning. The rooster greets the morning with a tone that feels vaguely personal. You pull your rough blanket tighter, hoping if you lie still enough, time will reverse and it'll be yesterday again. It doesn't. The sun's rays slip through the wooden slats, catching dust in the air like tiny ghosts dancing on a deadline. And your job today? It's the one everyone hopes someone else will do. Travel to town. The market is a full day's walk, unless you have a donkey, which you don't. You did once, sort of. His name was Stumble and he had strong opinions about inclines. But he mysteriously wandered off during tax week, and you're still convinced your neighbor traded him for a bag of barley and some boots. So it's you, your legs, and a sack of goods for bartering. A bundle of dried leeks, a few eggs, and a hand-woven comb that looks far better than it works. You tuck everything into a cloth sling, mutter a prayer to Saint Crispin for foot comfort, and head off. The road to town is more like a suggestion than a path. It winds past hedgerows, low stone walls, and fields dotted with grazing sheep that look at you like you owe them money. You pass a weathered shrine to the Virgin Mary, its base buried in weeds, and drop a coin in the offering bowl. You can't afford to offend any saints this week. The wind picks up, carrying with it the scent of damp earth, charcoal, and manure. A medieval perfume, if ever there was one. You hear the rhythmic creak of a distant cart, the bark of a dog, and the squawk of a goose with an attitude problem. Nature's podcast. It takes hours, but eventually, the town rises on the horizon, like a particularly defensive cake, round, layered, and surrounded by walls. Those walls are tall, stone, and serious. And the gatekeeper is even more serious. He eyes you like a rat with a coin purse. Purpose? He asks. To trade, you say, lifting your sack. He pokes through it, frowns at your comb, and waves you through with the same energy as someone brushing lint off their sleeve. Inside the town, the contrast is immediate. Narrow, cobbled streets twist like intestines. The smell of roasting meat competes with urine-soaked alleyways. A merchant shouts about miracle tonics that cure everything from gout to heartbreak. A toothless woman slaps a fish against a slab and yells, "Fresh enough to bite back." The market square is chaos on a schedule. Stall after stall brims with cloth, pottery, tools, and pickpockets. You hold your sack close. City kids are fast, and your eggs are fragile. A bard strums a lute with 3 strings and sings about a local lord who lost his pants in battle. The lyrics are questionable, but the rhythm's catchy. You trade your leeks for beeswax candles, the eggs for a tiny pewter brooch shaped like a hedgehog, don't ask, and the comb, miraculously, for a hunk of good rye bread. Someone must really hate tangles. As you wander, you notice a public notice nailed to a post. It announces a new law. Anyone caught uttering heretical speech against holy relics will be fined or punished by humiliation. Below it, someone scrawled in charcoal, "What if the relic is just a stick?" Historians still argue whether medieval people sincerely believed every holy claim or just played along to avoid that whole punishment by humiliation thing. You slip away before anyone sees you reading too intently. Down a side street, You find a tanner's shop. The smell is worse than the sewage trench, sharp, sour, and permanent. The tanner, a cheerful man missing 3 fingers, offers you scraps for free. Offcuts, he says, make good shoe patches or scarecrow hair. You nod politely and accept them. Waste not. By late afternoon, your feet ache, your bread is half eaten, and you've nearly been run over twice. Once by a cart full of hay, once by a nun chasing a chicken. You sit on a low wall outside the church, watching people pass. A group of children play stickball with alarming intensity. A beggar hums to himself, eyes closed, palms open. You drop your last coin in his hand. It feels right. A bell tolls from the church tower, vespers. People cross themselves, bow slightly, and turn towards the doors. You join the stream inside. It's cool and dim within. Candles flicker, casting long shadows. The stained glass glows in the soft light, depicting saints with solemn eyes and excellent posture. The priest chants in Latin, and though you don't understand a word, the cadence lulls you. Your mind drifts. Somewhere in the rafters, a pigeon coos. A child sneezes. The air smells of incense, damp stone, and faint mildew. It's peaceful, in a mysterious medieval kind of way. After the service, you begin the long walk home. The sky has bruised into purples and oranges, and the air cools with every step. You pass travelers headed towards town, their faces shadowed, their voices muffled. One of them carries a cage with a rooster inside. The rooster eyes you. You think it remembers this morning's insult. The path is quiet now. Only the sound of your breath, your steps, and the occasional owl. The stars appear one by one, like shy guests at a party. The moon rises, pale and indifferent. You arrive home long after full dark. Your legs throb, your legs are dry, and your arms ache from the weight of your trades. But when you enter, the hearth is still warm. Someone left a clay mug of nettle tea, and your bed, your lumpy... The rooster does not crow the next morning. Perhaps it has taken a personal vow of silence, or maybe it's nursing an existential crisis. Either way, the quiet is suspicious. You rise slowly, your legs stiff from yesterday's trek, and your back reminding you that medieval bedding is basically crunchy hay optimism held together by fabric lies. Outside, the village feels oddly still. A mist hugs the thatch rooftops and curls between the cottages like it's trying to eavesdrop. Then you hear it, the church bell tolling, not the usual slow, deliberate call to prayer, but a hurried, frantic clanging that makes your skin tighten. That's never a good sign. You shuffle out to the lane just as others do the same, rubbing sleep from their eyes, pulling cloaks tight, looking around as if someone might explain what's going on. From down the road, a messenger arrives on horseback, muddy and breathless. He doesn't dismount, just waves a hand and shouts, "Bandits took the next village over, burned the grain stores, took 3 oxen and a priest." Well, that escalated. You blink, trying to process. Bandits, that's not a bedtime story, that's your entire food supply 1 village over, and possibly your cousin's favorite cow. You murmur a curse, then remember this is a God-fearing time, so you silently apologize to Saint Leonard, patron of prisoners and possibly bad decisions. The village convenes in front of the chapel. Your reeve, a man who smells like turnips and speaks with unnecessary volume, starts listing immediate tasks, guard rotations, reinforcement of the palisade, counting how many pitchforks you actually have. Spoiler, not enough. You're assigned lookout duty on the northern edge, where the tree line hangs heavy, like it's hiding secrets. You don't even get a weapon, just a sharpened stick and a whistle made from bone. Not that you'd know how to fight off a bandit with a real sword anyway. You once lost a skirmish with a particularly aggressive goose. You trudge up the path, nerves high, eyes darting. Every rustle feels like doom, every bird call suspicious. A squirrel darts past, and you flinch so hard your whistle flies into the underbrush. You retrieve it, scowling. This is not how you imagined medieval life. You thought there'd be more jousting and fewer emergency tree vigils. As the sun climbs, others join the watch, and you take turns staring into nothingness. One of your companions is a toothless old man named Wulfric, who swears he once killed a Viking with a spoon. Historians still argue whether villagers like Wulfric exaggerated these tales, or whether he actually meant spoon metaphorically. Either way, he's delightful. Between shifts, you sit on a rock and nibble the rye bread you earned at market. It's gone a bit stale, but
That afternoon, a priest arrives from the burned village. He's singed, scowling, and smells like fear and ashes. He tells of bandits wearing mismatched armor, shouting in different languages, and carrying torches like they were born from fire. They took the relic, he adds bitterly. The finger bone of Saint Tilda. You don't know much about Saint Tilda, but you're pretty sure she didn't die so her remains could end up in the bottom of a bandit's sack. The village gasps. Relic theft is serious. It's not just spiritual theft. It's bad luck in powdered bone form. The Reeve calls a meeting again. This time, the tone is darker. There's talk of sending someone to the local lord for help. You look around and realize, with the slow dread of someone watching the last biscuit vanish at a feast, that everyone's eyes are landing on you. Why? Because you went to town yesterday. You're the traveler. That's all it takes in a village like this. One trip past the fields and suddenly you're Marco Polo. And so you're given the honor/punishment of delivering a message to the local lord's manor. It's half a day's walk north, through woods and over a brook that smells like wet disappointment. You're handed a wax-sealed letter, 2 turnips for the journey, and the kind of well-meaning smile people give when they don't think they'll see you again. Off you go. The forest is thick, the kind that seems to watch you as much as you watch it. You hum to keep your nerves down. A squirrel darts across your path, then another, then a rabbit, then... Was that a deer? Why are all the animals heading away from where you're going? Eventually you come upon the manor. It's stone, stern, and surrounded by retainers who look like they've never smiled in their lives. One of them stops you with a halberd and says nothing. You just hold out the letter like it's a holy relic. He takes it, sniffs, why, and disappears inside. You wait. And wait. And just when you start to think you've been forgotten, you're summoned. Inside the manor, it's surprisingly warm, with rushes on the floor and tapestries on the walls depicting various beheadings, because nothing says welcome like finely embroidered violence. The lord is a tired-looking man with bags under his eyes and fingers heavy with rings. He listens, nods, and finally grunts. We'll send someone tomorrow. That's it. No rousing speech. No army forming behind you. No promised vengeance. Just a vague plan and a crumbly biscuit you're offered on the way out. The walk home feels longer. By the time you reach your village again, dusk is falling, and the mist has returned, curling around your ankles like an anxious cat. People gather around as you deliver the news. Help is coming. Probably. They nod, sigh, and begin preparing anyway. Reinforcing doors, sharpening sticks, hiding anything. The sun rises, sluggish and hazy, like it knows what's coming and is trying to stay in bed. You, unfortunately, don't have that luxury. You wake on edge, the hay scratching at your skin and your back staging a small rebellion. Outside, the village is already bustling with the kind of nervous energy that comes before storms and sieges. The promised reinforcements from the manor have not arrived. You glance toward the road, hoping to see a proud line of soldiers in gleaming armor. Instead, there's a goat eating a shoe someone left out overnight. Morale? Not exactly soaring. You and the other villagers are tasked with finishing the watchtower.
a grand term for what is essentially a ladder lashed to two trees with a rickety platform on top. You take a turn up there, peering out across the fields with a sense of theatrical importance. You squint at every twitch of grass, every bird in flight. Nothing yet. Then, just after midday, you hear it. Hoofbeats. Multiple. Thundering, not casual. Coming from the south. The wrong direction. You shout down to the others, heart pounding. People scatter like spilled grain, dragging carts into position and herding children to the church. You feel like yelling, "This is not a drill." But of course, drills haven't been invented yet. Soon you see them. A small group of riders, dust rising behind them, faces obscured by helmets and scarves. No banners, no uniforms. Definitely not the Lord's men. Bandits. You climb down fast enough to nearly break your ankle, yelling orders you hope sound braver than they feel. "To the barricades!" you shout, realizing you've become exactly the kind of accidental hero who gets turned into a ballad, assuming you survive. The bandits don't charge immediately. They circle, inspecting, taunting. One even waves. Rude. Your fellow villagers clutch tools and makeshift weapons, farming implements, cooking knives, an old mace someone unearthed behind the chapel. The reeve tries to negotiate, stepping out with a white cloth tied to a stick. He yells something about parley, offering grain or livestock. The leader of the bandits responds by shooting an arrow at the reeve's foot. It misses. Barely. Negotiations. Unsuccessful. Tension crackles like kindling. The first arrow flies and suddenly, it's chaos. You duck behind an overturned cart, clutching a pitchfork like it's Excalibur. Shouts erupt, along with clanging and the dull thud of wood hitting wood. Someone sets off a smoke pot from the forge, accidentally impressive. The air fills with coughing and confusion, which is, honestly, about as good as...
In the middle of it all, the priest, yes, the same one who smelled like ashes, starts ringing the chapel bell, like he's auditioning for a new kind of heavy metal. It's meant to alert nearby settlements or possibly scare the enemy with holy noise. You're not sure, but it definitely adds to the drama. Your legs tremble, arms ache, and you lose track of time. You're covered in more mud than valor. Then, just when things seem hopeless, more hoofbeats, this time from the north. Actual soldiers, the Lord's men, wearing proper armor, carrying real weapons, and, most importantly, looking like they know what they're doing. The bandits scatter. Some flee, others are caught. A few vanish into the trees, probably planning to rob a less alert village tomorrow. You slump down against a barrel, limbs buzzing, adrenaline draining fast. You survived. Barely. Later, the village gathers to assess the damage. A few injuries, a couple of missing chickens, one mysteriously vanished goat who may have defected, but mostly you're intact. The soldiers speak with the reeve, offer vague assurances, and ride off again. Their duty fulfilled in about 30 minutes. You sit by the fire that evening, wrapped in a scratchy wool blanket, sipping something that tastes vaguely like fermented despair, but at least it's warm. People around you are quiet, exhausted, processing. Someone starts playing a pipe. Badly, it's comforting in a way. And in that moment, you think about how absurd your last few days have been.
You've gone from sloshing through pig mud to helping defend your entire village from armed raiders. Your bathwater still has fleas, your clothes still smell like smoke and goat, and your dinner is mostly dried peas, but you're alive. Someone pats you on the back. You did good, they say. Then they hand you a slightly charred turnip. It's the medieval equivalent of a gold medal. You nibble it and stare into the fire, the crackling flames dancing in your eyes. In the flickering glow, the world softens. You hear murmurs of plans to rebuild, to fortify the gate, to celebrate with a feast if there's anything left in the pantry that hasn't been scorched, stolen, or repurposed as a weapon. One of the children who had been hiding in the chapel tugs your sleeve. "Are the bad men gone?" she asks, wide-eyed. You nod slowly. For now. The fire crackles. Someone starts singing, slightly off-key but earnest. The sky darkens. Stars flicker into place above the smoky rooftops.
Morning comes soft and smoky. A haze clings low over the village, the kind that blurs the lines between dreams and waking. You rise slowly, every joint protesting, every muscle quietly filing a complaint. But you're up, alive, again. The chickens, somehow oblivious to yesterday's drama, are clucking and pecking as usual. The same goat that went missing is back, looking suspiciously well fed. You eye it. It blinks at you with absolutely no remorse. After the chaos of the attack, life doesn't exactly go back to normal. It limps there. The barricades are half dismantled, the watchtower repurposed into drying racks, and someone's trying to fix the cartwheel with, oddly, a spoon. Your pitchfork has a new place of honor leaning next to the church door. The reeve gives a small speech, something about resilience and community. No one really hears it because old Martin falls asleep standing up. You're not sure if it's from relief or just a very specific skill set. Either way, it breaks the tension, and everyone laughs softly, a kind of exhausted exhale in unison. You're given a new job now, guard rotation. Not because you're particularly skilled, but because, let's face it, surviving makes you a local legend. There's even a song going around about the pitchfork warrior. It's terrible, out of tune, and wildly inaccurate, but you hum along with it anyway. Food is rationed more carefully now. The cellar, which once seemed bottomless with turnips and dried lentils, suddenly feels precious. You help the baker sift through flour, salvaging what's usable from the bag that caught a stray arrow. Bread has never felt so noble. And then there's the cleanup. The outer field, once neat rows of barley, now has muddy gouges and hoof prints like a battlefield scrapbook. The priest insists on a blessing, splashing everything with water that smells faintly of mildew. Still, it feels like something, a reset button, maybe. Your nights are lighter now. Sleep comes easier, though dreams still swirl with the clang of improvised battle. You find yourself standing by the well more often, watching the stars or listening to the wind as it rushes through the trees like a whisper from a safer world. You start noticing things, how the moss glows faintly in the moonlight, how the birds call in layers, one answering another like gossiping neighbors. Some visitors arrive, traders, traveling monks, one very confused minstrel who thought he was in Cornwall. They bring tales of distant lords and rumors of a crusade gathering somewhere across the sea. Historians still argue whether the average peasant had any clue about the broader world, but snippets always trickle in. Kings quarreling, popes issuing threats.
A tanner sets up temporary shop nearby. He's from another village, displaced by a flood. His stories are worse than yours. Sick cows, corrupt reeves, a haunted abbey. You decide not to compare traumas and just trade a spoon for some surprisingly decent leather gloves. There's a new face in the manor, too. A steward who actually counts things properly. Taxes are still a thing, but now they might at least be written down. You're skeptical, of course, everyone is. But a few folks dare to imagine stability, however temporary. One of your favorite moments comes when the children begin reenacting the village's great defense with sticks and buckets on their heads. They argue over who gets to be you, the pitchfork warrior. You laugh. Then you wonder if they'll even remember any of this in 10 years, or if it'll become one of those vague tales grown-ups tell about that one time with the bandits and the goat. And slowly, gradually, the mundane returns. Fields are replanted, roofs patched. The sheep somehow double in number, no one questions it. Your own hands, once blistered and raw, start feeling like hands again instead of cracked tools. You even catch a few hours of rest one afternoon under an apple tree, warm breeze ruffling your hair, a rare luxury. And maybe that's the real miracle here, not survival, not heroics. Just this, a nap in the sun, safe enough to drift off, even if only for a little while. You hear talk of a festival soon, not to celebrate the bandits' retreat. That would be too on the nose. But to honor the changing seasons, the return of the planting moon. You'll help decorate, hang herbs in bundles, maybe wear something that isn't smeared with soot and goat grease. The wheel of the year keeps turning, slowly, relentlessly, and somehow you're still here, riding its creaky wooden spokes like everyone else. So if you came into this thinking you'd waltz through medieval life like a knight in shining armor, well, the pitchfork says otherwise. You've endured hunger, filth, smoke, politics, absurd laws, strange cures, an invasion, and at least one highly suspicious herbal poultice. You probably have parasites. You definitely have stories. And whether it's glory or absurdity that gets remembered, somewhere, in a dusty scroll or a misremembered folk tune, you're part of it now. Wine down, 300 words. The fire is down to glowing coals now, just a soft, amber shimmer beneath layers of ash. The village around you is silent. No bells, no carts, no panicked shouts or smoke in the air. Only the low murmur of night sounds. A breeze slipping through shutters, the quiet bleat of a sheep shifting in sleep. A single owl calling out from the woods. You lie back on the straw mattress, still lumpy, still mildly itchy, but now, somehow, it feels softer. Like your bones are